Hi, and welcome to TED Talks Rutgers Edition. My name is Kelly Feeney, and I'm an elementary school teacher, and today I'm going to be talking to you about standardized testing. I want you to pause for a minute and think about what words come to mind when you hear the word standardized testing. Multiple choice, assessment, accurate, achievement, biased, necessary, judgments and challenging, reporting. There are so many different words that come to mind when we hear the word standardized testing. And somehow, over the past several years, standardized testing have become two of the most polarizing words in the education world. They separate the businessmen who promote them. They separate the politicians who look at their results and lean on them for reform and funding. They separate the teachers and students and parents who are forced to endure them, and the teachers who ultimately wind up having to teach to them for their children to be successful. How did these two words become so polarizing? Before becoming a teacher, I would have told you that standardized testing was accurate and a necessary part of the educational process, that they give a complete picture of what goes on. After all, I was a good student, I worked hard in school, and therefore I did well, and they must be accurate. Except, they were written for me. I'm a middle-class white American who both of her parents were college educated, including two of my grandparents. It wasn't until I met Juan that I realized there were some real problems with the system. Juan was the kind of student who you dream of as having a teacher. He would impress anyone. He was the child of immigrants and a first-generation American. He didn't speak English in his home, and his parents couldn't read or write. They could barely sign their names. But Juan and I both learned the value of hard work and setting high expectations from them. They expected Juan to do well in school. They wanted him to be successful, and anything less than his best was unacceptable. I had never seen a student more motivated to learn than when Juan came to school. And he did it. He went from a middle second grade reading level at the beginning of third grade to a beginning fourth grade level at the end of third grade. He made a year and a half's worth of growth. He mastered all of our math concepts and was well liked by his peers and respectful of all adults. He was the kind of student who you're like, yes, this is why I became a teacher. He needed me. He needed me because his academic needs were not going to be met at home. They had to be met by me. Then it came time for standardized testing. Everyone in my building was freaking out about what was going to happen. I wasn't. My class had worked hard. I had worked hard. They were ready. So this one particular part of the test was a poem prompt, and we had to read the poem to them and the question, and the students responded in writing. I read the poem to my students. It was all a play on words. My mom told me to go right to bed. I said, why not go left instead? My mom said, pick up your room. I said, it's much too heavy. And then it asked the students to write about a time when they put a new spin on something. My students got their pencils, got right to work. I wasn't worried. We'd just done a whole unit on responding to poetry. They were going to be great at this. And as I walked around and I started looking at their writing, my heart sank. They were all writing off topic. They were all writing about a time when they disobeyed their parents. They didn't understand the humor in the poem. They didn't understand the nuance of the language. They didn't even understand the question because they didn't know what it meant to put a new spin on something. Most of them were English language learners that year as well. As we got our test results back in the fall, insufficient in writing, all of my students. Their writing wasn't even read because they got off topics. It didn't look at the content of what they had written or the quality. It was just off topic. They hadn't answered the question the test writer wanted. And I was frustrated. And I wondered, what messages are we sending to our students? What effect does this have on them? After having read the research of Carol Dweck, I realized it does have an effect. There's two different kinds of mindsets. There's a fixed mindset, which is believing that you have a certain amount of ability that can't be changed. And there's a growth mindset that believes with work and energy, you can become better at something. There are other researchers who realize how tied this is to education. McCutcheon, James, Mueller, and McGregor looked at just this, and Carbonell looked at just this thing. They looked at the work, and they decided to see what effect does mindset have on standardized testing. They found, in a longitudinal study, that when students have a fixed mindset, their growth on standardized assessments drops. And then when they have a growth mindset, they do better. And that if they do decline, it's not as that rapid of a rate. So they, in their concluding arguments, argued that growth mindset should be a fundamental part of teaching schools. But how many messages are we sending to our students that reinforce the fixed mindset when they get many, many reports that say, you're insufficient, not proficient, not meeting expectations? How do we combat that and let them know that there's so much more than this one assessment? My mom must have been reading my mind as I was thinking about this question, because she sent me a letter from a teacher. It read, "Dear students, next week you will take your I-STEP test for math and reading. And 2 weeks after that, you will take your I-READ test. I know how hard you've worked, but there is something very important you must know. The I-STEP and I-READ tests do not assess all of what makes you special and unique. The people who create these tests and score them do not know each of you like I do, and certainly not the way your families do. They do not know that some of you speak 2 languages, or that you love to sing or draw. They have not seen your natural talent for dancing. They do not know that your friends count on you to be there for them, and that your laughter can brighten the darkest day, or that your face turns red when you feel shy. They do not know that you participate in sports, wonder about the future, or sometimes you help with your little brother or sister after school. They do not know that you are kind, trustworthy, and thoughtful, and every day you try to be your very best. The scores you will get from these tests will tell you something, but they will not tell you everything. These tests do not define you. There are many ways of being smart. You are smart. You are enough. You are the light that brightens my day and the reason I am happy to come to work each day. So in the midst of all these tests, remember that there is no way to test all of the amazing and awesome things that make you you. All I ask is that you do your personal best and do not give up. You have been working for this since kindergarten and are ready, and I believe in you." And I thought, this teacher gets it. This teacher recognizes that students are so much more than just that one assessment, and that her job is not defined by that one assessment either. Parents around the country started to realize this last year too, when the Park movement started in Chicago and spread like wildfire. In an article written by William Patrick, they were looking at different results in New York State and what had happened. And ed departments are starting to push back. They're starting to prevent parents from opting their students out of tests by saying that in order for schools to get funding, a certain amount of students must be tested. One parent, Mandy Sampson, responded that said, "You want to make a bet? My children are not numbers to me. They are real, live, living, breathing human beings with feelings." The test doesn't show this. It provides a very incomplete picture of what the students do and know in school. In the same article, Dr. Polka from Niagara University talked about how we accept students from all walks of life, ability, backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses, and yet we try to put one test to encompass all of them. If our students aren't one size fits all, and we expect our teachers to differentiate and teach, how does that make sense? I really liked the way he stated, "This standardized approach, one size fits all, is just an anathema to our value system and the American educational ethos. We encourage uniqueness, we encourage differentiation, and somehow we still don't find it." In a study of the effects of standardized testing that happened in 1991, conducted by Shepard and Doherty, they found an increased amount of teacher pressure to do well on the tests. They found that basic skill instruction increased and higher level thinking questions decreased. That non-tested content suffers in school. That instructional time is worked to fit the needs of the testing, and it distorts what teachers and students want to authentically be doing. It increases instances of cheating, and it compares districts to allot funding and doesn't allow them to learn. The alarming part of this is that it's still true more than 25 years later. In an article written by Dylan Williams, he says, "It now seems to be generally accepted that most student achievement, at least in the areas in which we are usually interested in, is too multidimensional for a single score for each student to be particularly useful. A single score, no matter how carefully derived, cannot do much more than designate a student as either having attained an acceptable level of achievement or some outcome of interest, or having failed to do so." So why are we still doing this 25 years later when we know that it's unacceptable to judge students in this way? So what do? Based on the information I presented to you, it might seem that I'm anti-standardized tests, which, believe it or not, in fact, I'm not. I'm against the current way that it's carried out. I think standardized tests have a place in school. Teachers need to know how they're doing against neighboring districts. Students need to know if they're meeting the levels of expectations that are set. What I am against is high stakes testing, putting all of the eggs into one basket as to whether or not a school is a good school or whether or not a teacher is a good teacher. That's an incomplete picture. It's too multidimensional for that. So what am I suggesting? Well, I'm suggesting assessments that are measured, multiple, and varied. They need to be different. Are we measuring student affect, teacher job satisfaction, town satisfaction with the school, as well as student achievement and growth? Growth becomes a big component of it. Why are we able to give intelligent tests for the GRE and not to our students? Can they take a SMART test that shows this is the level they're achieving at now and see if they grow from year to year? Wouldn't that make a lot more sense for judging schools on how they're doing? And lastly, shared creation. There's so much secretiveness and tightness around the testing that it almost encourages cheating. If teachers, students, and parents were openly involved with the test creators and going what should be on the test, what to expect, and that different areas were available to be reviewed and checked, then I think that we would find the test to be a more meaningful measure. If it wasn't such a surprise and we weren't keeping it so locked up, they might be able to find a clearer picture of what our students are. Albert Einstein once said, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's dumb. And I think that's often what we do to our students. We judge them in one way and then tell them that they're not sufficient. That doesn't meet my goals as a teacher, and it shouldn't meet anyone's goals when they're looking at school improvement. Standardized testing do not have to be such a polarizing phrase. They can become a phrase associated with collaboration and growth if we only change the way we are approached to it. Here are some of the resources and research I used as I was creating this speech if you're interested in following up with it. Thank you for your time, for listening, and I hope that you have been given a new view as to how we should look at standardized test reform in this country.